Winning Mr. Olympia is supposed to be the finish line. The moment everything you sacrificed finally pays off. But for almost every man who ever stood on that stage, holding that trophy, winning was just the beginning of a different kind of fight. Injuries that ended careers overnight, controversy that followed champions for decades, bodies that simply couldn't keep up with the sport they helped build, and a standard that kept rising, whether they were ready for it or not. Some walked away clean, most didn't get that choice. This is the dark side of winning Mr. Olympia. Number 1, Larry Scott. Larry Scott is probably the most unusual champion in Mr. Olympia history, and not because of anything dramatic. He won the first ever Mr. Olympia in 1965, defended it in 1966, and then just walked away. No injury, no scandal, no humiliating loss on stage. He was 28 years old and simply decided he was done. That's actually harder to do than it sounds. Most competitors at that level can't let go. The stage becomes an addiction. But Larry seemed to have a clarity that most champions never find. 2 titles, no defeats, career over, clean exit. Here's the thing though, retiring undefeated doesn't mean he would have stayed undefeated. If you go back and watch the 1966 competition, there's a 23-year-old named Sergio Oliva finishing fourth, and he already looked like something the sport had never seen before. The width, the muscle insertions, the sheer structural advantage, it was all there. Sergio wasn't just another competitor. He was a different kind of human being built for this sport. Larry's arms were his trademark, those biceps built on naturally narrow clavicles that made them look even more pronounced. But Sergio didn't have a weakness Larry could exploit. He had none of the typical trade-offs. So Larry Scott's downfall was never going to be a bad prep or an off-season gone wrong. It was simply that the sport was evolving faster than anyone expected, and the next man in line was arguably a genetic freak, even by Olympia standards. Retiring when he did might have been the smartest decision Larry Scott ever made. Number 2, Sergio Oliva. Sergio Oliva didn't lose in 1970 because he got worse. He lost because he stopped being untouchable. And in this sport, that's enough. From 1967 to 1969, Sergio was operating on a completely different level. The width, the tiny waist, the muscle bellies. Nobody had seen anything like it. He wasn't just winning, he was making other competitors look like they were in the wrong sport. But 1970 was different. He came in heavier, which on paper sounds like progress. The problem was the condition wasn't there. The separation that made his physique so striking had softened just enough to matter. The silhouette was still jaw-dropping, but the details that judges actually score, the lines, the dryness, the separation, those were slightly off. Arnold, meanwhile, showed up sharper than he ever had. Better posing, better conditioning, and honestly, better timing. He had spent years studying Sergio specifically to beat him. That level of obsession is hard to compete against. But here's what the scorecard doesn't show. Arnold was also exactly what the IFBB wanted at that moment. Young, articulate, charismatic, and built for cameras. Bodybuilding was trying to grow beyond gym culture, and Arnold fit that vision perfectly. Sergio had the legacy, Arnold had the direction the sport was heading. When the conditioning gap and the political winds both move against you at the same time, the result is rarely a surprise. Number 3, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold's 1975 retirement was clean. 6 titles, no real challengers left, walked away on top. That should have been the end of the story. Then 1980 happened. He came back with barely any prep, no formal announcement, and very little warning to the other competitors. Physically, he wasn't a disaster, probably around 90% of what he used to be. But that 10% gap was exactly where the problems lived. The legs were behind, the chest and arms, which were once his most dominant features, had lost that thick, dense, almost unreal fullness from his mid-70s prime. The mass was still there, but it looked different, lighter somehow. Here's the part that made it worse. The competition that year was genuinely stacked. Frank Zayn, Chris Dickerson, Boyer Coe, these weren't fillers. These were serious athletes who had been preparing specifically for that stage. When Arnold was handed the title, the crowd booed. Competitors were openly furious. Some of them walked out, It became one of the most controversial decisions in Olympia history, and honestly, that controversy never fully went away. Arnold's actual downfall wasn't a loss. It was something harder to recover from, a win that felt wrong to almost everyone watching. His prime years built a legacy that was almost untouchable. The 1980 comeback put a question mark at the end of it. A clean retirement in 1975 would have been a perfect ending. Instead, the last chapter of his competitive career is still argued about today. Number 4, Franco Columbo. Franco Columbo's story starts with something that had nothing to do with bodybuilding politics or conditioning. It starts with a freak accident. In 1977, during the World's Strongest Man competition, Franco blew out his knee so badly that most people genuinely believed his career was finished. He had won the Olympia in 1976, was considered one of the most complete physiques of his era, and suddenly he was rehabbing an injury that would have ended most athletes permanently. When he came back in 1981 and won, the comeback narrative was real. Nobody fakes that kind of recovery, but the timing created an instant credibility problem. This was 1 year after the Arnold controversy, and Arnold was still heavily involved in promoting the show. The skepticism was already in the room before anyone even stepped on stage. Physically, Franco looked good, genuinely impressive given what his knee had been through. But 1981 Franco wasn't 1976 Franco. The conditioning wasn't as sharp. The lower body had visible gaps, and competitors like Chris Dickerson and Tom Platz were arguably more complete packages that night. The win wasn't celebrated, it was questioned, and that's the part that stuck. Franco Columbo deserved better than to have his comeback win become a footnote in someone else's controversy. But that's exactly what happened, and it slightly dims what should have been a straightforward redemption story. Number 5, Frank Zayn. The 1980 Olympia ended Frank Zayn's reign, but the circumstances around it were messy enough that calling it a clean loss feels inaccurate. 8 weeks before the show, Zayn had a serious accident. He lost roughly 15 pounds of muscle and didn't have enough time to rebuild it, so he showed up leaner than usual, still detailed, still conditioned, but noticeably smaller than his 1979 version. And in bodybuilding, showing up smaller than your previous self is almost impossible to recover from on stage. That 1979 version, by the way, was probably the best he ever looked. Bigger and fuller than his earlier titles, but still razor sharp. Balanced from every angle, no weak points, nothing to pick apart. That was a physique that was genuinely difficult to beat on pure merit. But 1980 wasn't judged on pure merit. Arnold announced he was coming back with almost no warning. Competitors who had been preparing for months suddenly found out they were sharing a stage with the most famous bodybuilder alive. Many of them believed the result was decided before anyone walked out. Whether that's true or not, the atmosphere was chaotic from the start. Zayn's downfall wasn't about being outclassed. His best version was never actually beaten on that stage. What happened instead was a combination of bad timing, a freak accident, and one of the most politically charged nights in the sport's history, all colliding at once. Sometimes, the circumstances beat you before the competition even starts. Number 6, Chris Dickerson. Chris Dickerson won the 1982 Olympia at 43 years old, retired immediately after, and by every conventional measure, that should be considered a success. Most competitors spend their entire careers chasing a single title and never get there. But even that win had an asterisk on it. Frank Zayn that year made a legitimate case on aesthetics and overall balance, the kind of completeness that had won him 3 consecutive titles just a few years earlier. Dickerson was technically refined and well-proportioned, but he wasn't dominant. He didn't walk on stage and make everyone else look small. The win was real, but it wasn't the kind that silences every critic in the room. When he came back in 1984 and placed 11th, it wasn't surprising. It was just confirmation of how fast the sport had moved. Because 1983 and 1984 weren't just New Year's, they were a different era entirely. Samir Bannout brought a conditioning and muscle detail that felt like a step forward. Then Haney arrived, and Haney wasn't just better than Dickerson, he was operating on a scale that made the entire early 80s aesthetic look dated almost overnight. Dickerson's window was real, but it was narrow. He happened to compete during a brief transitional period between the classic physique era and the mass era. He was the right man at the right time, and then the time changed. No scandal, no collapse, no controversy, just a sport that outgrew him faster than almost anyone expected. Number 7, Samir Bannout. The 1983 Olympia win genuinely caught people off guard, and not in a controversial way. Samir Bannout earned it. His conditioning that year was exceptional. The symmetry was clean. Every muscle group tied into the next. And then there was the back. That Christmas tree detail in his lower back became one of the most talked about individual features in Olympia history. It wasn't just impressive. It was the kind of thing that sticks in the memory of everyone who saw it. What's interesting is that behind the scenes, the win wasn't as clean as it looked. He was reportedly cramping badly at prejudging, and his posing routine wasn't particularly polished, but the physique carried him through anyway, which says a lot about how good the condition actually was. 1984 told a completely different story. The water retention issues that had followed him throughout his career came back. The sharpness was gone. The back was still muscular, but the detail that made it special in 1983 had softened. And then Lee Haney walked on stage. Haney came in around 240 pounds and genuinely lean. He matched Samir on the rear poses, the one area where Samir had a legitimate advantage, and then outscored him everywhere else. There was no category where Samir had a clear edge. Bannout's 1983 win was real, but it was also perfectly timed. He peaked during a brief window when that level of conditioning was enough. Once Haney reset the standard for what size and conditioning could look like together, that window closed permanently. 1 year at the top, no controversy, no politics, just unfortunate timing. Number 8, Lee Haney. 8 Olympia titles, no defeats. And when he walked away in 1991, he was arguably in the best shape of his career. That last part is what makes Haney's story genuinely rare. Most long reigns end with a visible decline, the champion hanging on a year or two too long, losing the edge that made them dominant. Haney didn't do that. The 1991 version was fuller in the upper body than he'd been in years. The arms looked exceptional. The back was still as wide as ever, and the conditioning was sharp. This wasn't a champion fading out. This was a champion at his ceiling. But for the first time in 8 years, someone on that stage genuinely threatened him. Dorian Yates showed up with a level of thickness and lower body mass that Haney simply didn't have. The legs, the overall density, the grainy condition, it was a different kind of physique. Haney still had the structural advantage, the better proportions, the composure of someone who had won that show 8 times, but the margin was uncomfortably narrow. A Yates win that night would not have been a robbery. What Haney recognized, and this is the part that doesn't get enough credit, was that Dorian wasn't just a tough competitor, he was a preview of where the sport was heading. More mass, more density, more extreme conditioning. That direction was only going to continue, so he left, clean, undefeated, on his own terms. His reign didn't end because someone beat him. It ended because he was honest enough with himself to see what was coming next. Number 9, Dorian Yates. Dorian Yates didn't lose his title. His body took it from him. Through most of the 1990s, Yates was competing hurt and still winning by wide margins. Torn biceps, nagging injuries, a thickening midsection that critics never let go of. None of it slowed him down enough to matter. His conditioning was so brutal, the density so overwhelming, that the rest of the lineup looked like they were competing for second place. But 1997 was a different kind of injury. Weeks before the Olympia, he tore the majority of his triceps off the bone. The structural damage was severe and visible. He competed anyway, which in itself says everything about the kind of competitor he was, and he won. But this time, the win came with real questions attached. Nasser El Sonbadi had one of the best showings of his career that night, fuller, more complete than he'd ever looked, and many people ringside felt he deserved the title. The judges disagreed, but the margin was close enough that the decision sparked genuine debate. Some felt Nasser was robbed. Others argued Dorian's overall package still edged him out despite the compromised arm. That conversation never fully settled. What made it worse was the visual. The The damaged triceps was obvious on stage. Fans weren't just watching a close competition, they were watching a champion compete with a visibly mangled arm. It changed the atmosphere of the whole night. Dorian knew what it meant. His entire approach to training was built on pushing past failure, maximum load, maximum intensity. That kind of training requires a body that can handle it. After that injury, it simply wasn't possible anymore. He retired as champion, undefeated on paper. But the real ending came a few weeks before the show on a training floor somewhere in Birmingham. Number 10, Ronnie Coleman. For 8 years, Ronnie Coleman made the Olympia stage look unfair. The back, the legs, the arms. Every body part was developed to a level that genuinely had no comparison. His 1998 debut title, the 2003 version, the raw mass he carried while still coming in conditioned. These were physiques that redefined what the human body could apparently look like with enough genetics, enough food, and an almost incomprehensible training intensity. 800-pound squats, 800-pound deadlifts, performed regularly for years while already carrying 300 pounds of muscle. That training style built the greatest physique the sport had seen. It also quietly destroyed his body from the inside out. By 2006, the damage had become visible on stage. Nerve damage had affected his left triceps and left lat, and the left quad wasn't filling out the way it used to. The asymmetries were subtle enough that casual fans might miss them, but judges don't miss them. He also came into prejudging slightly soft, slightly bloated in the midsection. Not dramatically off, but enough to matter at that level. Jay Cutler that year was the sharpest and fullest he had ever been. No injuries, no asymmetries, nothing to pick apart. When the healthier, fresher version of a comparable physique shows up at the right moment, the window closes fast. Ronnie still competed for years after 2006, which most people wish he hadn't. The surgeries that followed, multiple spinal operations, years of recovery, painted a picture of exactly what those training sessions had cost him physically. The dominance was real. The price was real too. Number 11, Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler's career has a detail that no other Olympia champion can claim. He lost the title, came back, and won it again. That had never happened before, and hasn't happened since. But his story also has two separate endings, and neither of them was particularly clean. The first came in 2008. Jay was going for his third consecutive title and showed up to prejudging noticeably softer than usual. The upper body lacked detail. The back wasn't as grainy as it needed to be. And standing next to Dexter Jackson's tight, polished, small-waisted physique made Jay's naturally blocky structure look more pronounced than it ever had before. Jay had always carried a wider midsection. When he was razor sharp, it didn't cost him. In 2008, it did. Dexter was precise, balanced, and completely dialed in. That was enough. What happened next is what separates Jay from everyone else on this list. Instead of slowly fading out or making excuses, he came back in 2009 in arguably his best condition ever and reclaimed the title. Clean, dominant, no controversy. Nobody had ever done that before. Then 2011 arrived. Weeks before the show, Jay tore his left biceps. The imbalance showed on stage. The back lost its usual thickness. The arms were visibly uneven, and even the legs looked slightly off compared to his better years. But the injury wasn't the only story that night. Phil Heath had genuinely arrived. Fuller, rounder, better from the back, cleaner in the mandatories. Even a healthy Jay Cutler would have had a difficult night against that version of Phil. The injury just made an already difficult situation worse. 2 downfalls, 1 comeback. No other champion on this list has that kind of career arc. Number 12, Dexter Jackson. Dexter's 2008 win, but best of who was available, is a harder legacy to defend than a clean, dominant win. So 2020 became a referendum on whether he actually belonged at that level. He made adjustments. The conditioning was sharper, the separation cleaner, the detail more refined than 2019. On paper, he came in as an improved version of himself, but the improvements came at a cost. The lower body, which was never his strongest feature to begin with, lost some of its fullness and roundness. He looked polished, but not massive, refined, but not imposing. Then Big Ramy walked out. The size difference in the comparisons was immediate and obvious. Ramy from the waist down was on a completely different scale, and this time he'd arrived conditioned enough that the judges couldn't dismiss the mass. That had always been Ramy's issue, the conditioning. In 2020, he finally solved it. Brandon didn't have a bad night, he just didn't have an answer for what was standing next to him. His title wasn't lost because he declined. It was lost because the window that created it closed, and the standard he'd been measured against finally showed up in shape. Number 15, Big Ramy. Ramy's story is really two separate stories running at the same time. One about finally reaching the top, and one about how quickly the body can turn against you. The 2020 win was years in the making. Ramy had been knocking on the door since 2014, consistently bringing mass that nobody else could match, but repeatedly showing up with conditioning issues that cost him. When he finally solved that problem in 2020, the result was inevitable. 2 titles, 2020 and 2021. Built almost entirely on the fact that nobody else on that stage could match his sheer size when he was adequately conditioned. But even during those winning years, the cracks were visible if you look closely. Slight loss in the lower lats, quad dents that kept appearing, structural details that suggested the absolute peak had already passed. He was winning on mass and momentum as much as on pure condition. 2022 exposed everything at once. The upper body looked watery, not fully filled out. The triceps had lost noticeable size, almost atrophied in appearance. The quad dents that had been a minor issue in previous years were now impossible to miss. The lower back detail had essentially disappeared. When your entire competitive identity is built on overwhelming everyone with size and density, losing fullness and sharpness simultaneously leaves you with nothing to fall back on. He dropped from 1st to 5th in a single year. That's not a gradual decline, that's a cliff edge. Ramy's window was always going to be narrow. He just didn't get as many years inside it as his potential once suggested. Number 16, Hadi Choopan. Hadi came into 2023 doing exactly what had won him the title the year before. The conditioning was brutal, grainy, tight, that trademark hardness that makes him look like he was carved rather than built. From the front, he was arguably just as sharp as 2022, maybe even slightly improved in the back when it came to overall size. On paper, that should have been enough. The problem was Derek Lunsford. Standing next to Derek in the comparisons, the battle shifted away from who was more conditioned, which was Hadi's strongest ground, and moved towards structure, density, and visual impact. Derek's back had a level of 3D thickness that was genuinely difficult to compete with. The lower lats, the traps, the overall muscularity from the rear, it matched or surpassed what Hadi could bring from those angles. And when Derek was close enough in conditioning from the side and rear, the size and proportion advantage started to matter more than the sharpness gap. Was Hadi slightly less dialed in than 2022? Possibly in small areas, but that's almost beside the point. The real story is that the judging criteria shifted in the room that night. When the question changes from who is sharpest to who looks most complete and dominant, Hadi's greatest weapon loses some of its power. He didn't fall off. He ran into a difficult matchup at a moment when the judges were rewarding a different set of qualities. Number 17, Derek Lunsford. The 2023 win came with an asterisk attached. Critics pointed to the chest detail, the arm sharpness, the leg size, areas where Derek hadn't fully convinced everyone. The general feeling was that the title was real, but the dominance wasn't quite there yet. So 2024 was supposed to be the answer to all of that. It went the other direction. He came in flatter. The density was still present, and structurally, he remained impressive. But the roundness and pop that had made his physique visually striking in 2023 was noticeably missing. The quads, already not his strongest feature, looked even less full. The proportions didn't hit the same way. It had the look of a peak that was miscalculated, tighter in some areas perhaps, but without the fullness that gives a physique its impact on stage. Meanwhile, the competition around him had genuinely improved. Samson Dauda came in larger, fuller, and well-balanced with competitive conditioning. Hadi returned with that trademark brutal sharpness and overall structural density that never really went away. Both men looked more complete in the comparisons, and Derek had no clear category where he was decisively winning. He dropped to third, from champion to third in a single year. But here's where Derek's story takes an unexpected turn. He came back in 2025 and reclaimed the title, making him only the second man in Olympia history to lose the title and win it back. Jay Cutler did it first in 2009. Derek joined that very short list 16 years later. Number 18, Samson Dauda. Sometimes the biggest mistake a champion can make is listening too carefully to the critics. Samson's 2024 win was built on a specific formula: mass, structure, and enough conditioning to make the size undeniable. He wasn't the driest competitor on stage, but he didn't need to be. The fullness, the roundness, the sheer imposing presence he brought fit his frame perfectly. It was a physique that played to every natural advantage he had. Then the judges asked for more sharpness. For 2025, he went deeper into his prep than he ever had before. The logic made sense on paper: address the one criticism, come back more complete, silence the doubters. But for someone carrying over 300 pounds in the off-season, pushing conditioning that far has consequences that are difficult to predict and even harder to reverse in the final weeks. He came in drier. He also came in flatter. The back double biceps, one of his most dominant poses in 2024, lost much of its pop. The quads didn't have the same fullness. The overall size that had made him overwhelming the year before was simply not there in the same way. He hadn't regressed dramatically in terms of actual muscle. The structure was still impressive, but the qualities that made him a champion had been traded away in pursuit of a look that didn't suit him naturally. Derek Lunsford reclaimed the title that night. Samson's downfall wasn't a lack of effort or preparation. It was a miscalculation about what his physique actually needed. He arrived at the Olympia as a different version of himself, and that version wasn't better. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below, and I do hope you enjoyed this one. With that being said, I will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.